Here we go. Hi there, Mr. Sterling. Can you hear us? Okay. And it looks like Ms. Miller is coming in. So right now we have a couple participants. My name is Chris. I'm with the Upper St. Clair Library. This is Whitney. We're both librarians here, and it's our pleasure to have you here, with Mr. Wayne Stewart. Mr. Wayne Stewart's talk. He's been an author. He's been writing books since 1988, and today he's going to specifically talk about his newest book, 1960, when the Pittsburgh Pirates had him all the way. So he'll be talking about the 60 Bucs. So please enjoy. I'll hand it on over to you.
Okay, we're all set then. First of all, I'd like to thank Chris and Whitney for inviting me and setting this up. And I'm hoping, people out there will remember the 60 Pirates and try to make the season come alive again. I'll start with a little background on myself. First of all, I was born in Pittsburgh in 1951. And back then, having your first breath be the polluted air of Pittsburgh wasn't so great. But people have joked about it and said that it's the something in the air or water of Pittsburgh that makes us so tough. Joe Montana put a twist on it. He said, well, it's the water, but it's the water in the Iron City beer that makes all the athletes so great. Well, just joking, but one writer mentioned specifically my hometown of Donora and said that we produce so many great athletes that he's going to take his son to the waters of the Monongahela and dip him in by his heel like Achilles in mythology, and that would give him the power of being a great athlete. But there's no doubt Donora was a big influence because it really was a hotbed of athleticism. Donora calls itself the home of champions, and it produced Ken Griffey Sr. I played on the same baseball team with him. And Ken Griffey Jr. is officially from Donora, born there. And Stan the Man Musial, Hall of Famer, of course, as is Jr. Ken Jr. actually one time met Stan Musial, and Stan teasingly said to him, you realize you're the second best left-handed hitting, left-handed throwing outfielder from Donora, Pennsylvania, born on November 21st. And, it's kind of true, but both guys, obviously great Hall of Famers. Donora also produced other great athletes, and some had interesting nicknames. There was a guy named Deacon Dan Towler, who led the NFL in rushing, and a guy out of West Point who set the record for the most athletic letters won there, and his name was Arnold, nicknamed Pope Galiffa. So we had a Deacon, a Pope, and they joked in Musial we also had a Cardinal. My parents, a big influence. My mom taught me to love words. The other way around. My mom taught me to love to read, and my dad taught me to love vocabulary. So I wrote my first book, although it was kind of primitive with a limited vocabulary. I called it Baseball is a Fun, Fun Game, and it sold out, one copy to my dad. But encouraged, I wrote my second book, Football is a Fun, Fun Game, and of course the third was, you can guess the title. But basically, yeah, that's it. I started doing magazine writing in '78. In '88, started writing books, and then that led to my most recent book, which is right here, in 1960, when the Pittsburgh Pirates had them all the way. So that's what we're going to focus on today. But you actually need some background before we hit 1960 by looking at the 1950s. In the 50s, the Pirates were pathetic by and large. During the first 8 years of that decade, they came in last place 5 years and next to last 3 years. I mean, they had no legacy or background as far as that goes. Their worst season was 52, when they had, if you want to call it a winning percentage, of .312. And that's based on 112 losses. And remember, back then they played 154 games. I mean, they were miserable. Joe Garagiola was on the team, and he shared a story about how bad they were. He talked about Branch Rickey, then the general manager, making the Pirates the first team to wear the protective batting helmets. He said, opposing pitchers joked and said, you guys didn't need to wear them. We weren't going to throw by your head, knock you down, or brush you back. Who's afraid of a bunch of 200 hitters, not 400? Anyway, 1953, the Pirates were miserable, finishing 55 games out of first place. And from 52 to 54, they averaged losing 106 games every year. Now, things turn around. In 1958, Danny Murtaugh's in his first full year as the manager. He boosted the team to second place finish, but then the next year, 59, excuse me, they slip a bit to fourth place. So basically, going into 1960, there's no indication these Pirates are going to be a team of destiny, but they soon became just that. In 1960, they had just over 20 wins in their last bat, and 12 times they were down to their last out in the last at bat, of course, and they won. They won 70% of their extra inning games and proved again they were a team of fate. I think that became most evident on a game played on April 17th. The Pirates trailed 5-0 going into the last of the ninth. And I'll read an excerpt from the book. Through 8.5 brutal innings, the Reds had battered 5 Pirate pitchers for 14 hits, and they led 5-0. A good portion of the 16,000 plus fans who had come out to celebrate Easter Sunday with the Pirates, they had vanished, gone home, vanished like chocolate bunnies into the mouths of children before the game was over, and they missed a lot. Smokey Burgess with 1 out, Bill Verdon, hope these are familiar names, and Bill Mazeroski had 3 straight singles. That brought home 1 run, but it's still gloomy. Then Hal Smith follows with a 3-run homer to cut the lead drastically. That would wind up, by the way, only being his second most important 3-run homer of the season. More on that later, of course. But, the Pirates are still battling. Don Hope made the 2nd out, so the Pirates were down to the 1 out. But the resilient Bucs came on strong. Dick Groat hits a single. Bob Skinner slams a walk-off home run, meaning the Pirates had stormed back on 6 hits to score the 6 runs, which probably, I'm figuring, caused Bob Prince to utter his famous expression when he was just kind of joking, in games where the Pirates looked doomed, but yet won, he would come back and say a line like, well, we had them all the way, which I took and twisted around for my title, when the Pirates had them all the way. Anyway, utility infielder Dick Schofield told me you could play 1,000 games like that one and maybe win one. And I started to figure that's true, but 1960 turned out to be a 1 in 1,000 type of season. Miraculous comebacks. It was amazing. The Pirates started to believe in themselves. Hal Smith said that after that win against the Reds, he turned to Bob Skinner and he said, "Hey, Bob, where do we sign up for our World Series tickets?" And that proved to be prophetic, even though he was just joking. Skinner thought that comeback against the Reds sort of turned the team around and said they were successful after that. It was like a confidence builder. And sure enough, 2 days later, they go on their longest winning streak of the season. They won 9 in a row. That took them to May 1st. So really, the rest of the year was pretty much smooth sailing. So we're going to jump to the most bizarre, wildest, most lopsided World Series ever, I think. And that is because when the Pirates lost, they lost big. They lost by scores of 16-3, 10-0, and 12-0. New York dominated the statistics. They set all kinds of records. The 12-0 shutout, largest in the history of the World Series. They out-hit the Pirates 338. That's as a team, 338 batting average to 256. If you're into on-base plus slugging, theirs was 911. The Pirates 0.656. They out-homered the Pirates 10-4. And this is one that still gets me. They outscored the Pirates 55-27, which means they more than doubled the Pirates' run output. But the Pirates win. And that prompted a classic line from Gino Cimoli. After the 7th game, he said, "You know what? They broke all the records, and we won the game." And, of course, they won the winner's share of the pot. Not big by our standards, $8,400. And the Yankees, for winning the pennant, they win $5,200 a man. To me, that displays one of the biggest disparities or contrasts between the game then and now. A rookie earning the minimum salary now earns more than 100 times what the Yankees got for winning a pennant. Or consider this, a guy like Mike Trout he gets roughly $200,000 a game. Every time he suits up, $200,000. Of course, back then in 1960, most of the Pirates had off-season jobs, and many of them had to continue to work after they retired. Roy Face, for example, was a carpenter, and we mentioned Gino Simoli. He drove a UPS truck in San Francisco, and he joked about it, saying, "You know what? I don't even want to think about what players are getting nowadays because if I thought about it, I'd be tempted to, take a leap off the Golden Gate Bridge." It was crazy. The minimum salary was 7,000. Bob Friend was the highest paid Pirate, about 32,000. Hoke, Law, Verdon, and Haddix, somewhere around 25,000. The team captain, Grote, and Harvey Haddix, and Grote, by the way, I'm sorry, Haddix was about 25,000. But Grote, who never played a game in the minors, would go on to win the MVP. He didn't even hit the $20,000 plateau. And two future Hall of Famers, that's Maz and Clemente, bargain basement, they were getting around $17,000 for the entire season. Of course, the seats were a lot cheaper. I got a rundown here for you. The bleacher seats, take a little guess. I'll hesitate while you think. $1. General admission $1.50. The reserve seats went for $2.50, and the best seats in the house, the box seats, $3. Try that at PNC now. See what happens. I think now would probably be best to take a look at the individual Pirates, some of the stars, some of the profiles. The Pirates had mainly two catchers, two guys behind the plate, Smokey Burgess and Hal Smith. And Smith told me in an interview that he thought that combination worked beautifully. Between the two of us, he said we knocked in close to 100 runs. It was 84. They both hit almost exactly 295. Smokey was 1 point lower. And let's see, it was Hal Smith, 11 homers, and I think it was 7 for Burgess. But of the 11 home runs by Smith, talk about a money player, he estimated that 9 of those home runs were game winners. And meanwhile, Burgess goes on to be one of the greatest pinch hitters ever, had the record for most pinch hits at one point. And Vernon Law commented on that. He said, "I always told people that you could wake up, Smokey Burgess in the middle of the winter, snow's on the ground like we have now, throw your best fastball to Burgess, and he'd line it for a base hit somewhere." And we're not going to really be able to interact as far as like, I can hear you respond, but I'm curious, maybe just raise your hand. Does anybody know what Smokey's real name was, his first name? No idea? Me neither. It was Forrest. Now, Forrest was 5'8", kind of on the chubby, dumpy side. And so teammates called him Spanky, as in Spanky of our gang, Little Rascals. One writer compared him, and this is a quote, to a walking laundry bag. Well, anyway, Elroy Face said he really felt bad about Hal Smith because he was underappreciated, and he hits a home run that's unforgettable to Pittsburghers, but is kind of forgotten. He said everybody thinks about the Mavs home run, which wins the series, but Face's quote, when I interviewed him, "I think that home run of Hal Smith's won the game more than anything else in a way." And Dick Grote went on to say that he does think it's the most underrated home run in all of baseball. Of course, my pet peeve is people in New York think that Bobby Thompson's home run that won a pennant is more important than Maz's home run that wins a World Series. That always irks me. Okay, we'll move around the diamond. Dick Stewart was the primary guy at first and the main source of power. But unlike the Yankees, who we're talking like Maris the next year is going to hit 61 home runs, Stewart led the team with only 23 home runs. He was kind of a one-dimensional, all-or-nothing swinger, but he did lead the team. One year in the minors, he had 66 home runs, and he had a huge ego. So when he signed his autograph, he would sign it Dick Stewart 66 for the home runs. And at the top of the letter I, he would dot his I with a star, sort of like some young kids in school, young girls sketch a little heart or a flower over their eyes. Mazeroski, of course, the second baseman, and many say he's the greatest of all time at that position. Johnny O'Brien was a veteran with the Pirates when Maz comes along. And O'Brien was versatile. He could pitch, and he did, and he could play short, and he could play second. He said, "I didn't even know what I was going to do when I went to the ballpark." But then he said, and this is a quote, I remember when they brought Maz up. I watched him for about 10 minutes, and then I said, I am now a utility infielder. He knew he wasn't going to beat out Maz. Now, everybody marveled at Maz's defensive skills. They said that when Ted Williams would bat sometimes in batting practice before a game, some guys would stop what they were doing, opponents, and they would gaze at Ted Williams hitting. Well, getting back to Maz, in the 1958 All-Star game, prior to the ball game, Maz starts taking infield, and the rest of the American leaguers, the other American leaguers, stopped to watch him taking infield practice. That's pretty impressive. Grote's at shortstop. Oh, by the way, I had a quote. Willie Mays, a famous quote about him. They said his glove is where triples went to die. And I'd like to extend that to Maz's glove is where base hits, seemingly base hits, went to become double plays. He's so good at turning two. Grote is the MVP that year, and he hits 325 to lead the league. But the funny thing is, there was a proposed trade in 1959 that would have sent him to the Kansas City Athletics for Roger Maris. At the last minute, they vetoed the trade, the Pirates did. And when you think about it, Maris, a couple days later, does get traded to the Yankees. So we had the possible switching of MVPs. Grote would have been with the Yankees, and who knows what would happen with Maris if he had been traded to Pittsburgh. But they both win the MVP in '60. Now, Grote was also a basketball standout, first guy ever to be inducted into both the College Hall of Fame for basketball and baseball. And he was a two-time All-American at Duke, where, in fact, he was the first guy there to have his jersey retired. He set a school record of 48 points in a game. That lasted for about 40 years. Played briefly in the NBA after setting the all-time record for a career for scoring in college, since broken. And of course, for years he did Pitt basketball broadcast. Now, one odd thing that happened down the stretch in September, Grote gets hit by a pitch, breaks his wrist, and there's a chance the Pirates don't win if utility infielder Dick Schofield doesn't just come on like gangbusters. I mean, he was an unlikely hero. Going into the season, his lifetime batting average was 196, and he winds up, even in his career, only being a 227 hitter. But man, when he filled in for Grote, he had a sensational 414 batting average down the stretch, and he had to be rusty. Prior to that, he had played only 2 games at short and only 13 games the whole season. And as you probably know, if you're a Pittsburgh fan, Schofield is the father of another ball player who made it to the bigs. It was also Dick. And he's the grandfather of Jason Worth, an all-star outfielder, who, to talk about money again, Jason Worth in his career earned about $136 million. And the grandfather, Schofield, never more than $32,000 in a single season. Then the World Series was odd for many reasons. I'll get to some others later, but 4 other players besides Schofield had sons who were big leaguers. An obscure pitcher named Fred Green had a son, who went on to the bigs, Skinner, Vernon Law, and Yogi Berra. Now, at third base, there was truly a tiger in Don Hoke. The guy was tough. He was an ex-Marine. He was a prize fighter who broke his nose 8 times, and he was the club leader. One year, he played winter ball in Cuba, and it was chaotic down there, craziness. There would be student protesters, college kids in the stands, and they would have like a little revolution almost during a game. One game, Hoke is at the plate. He's batting. And all of a sudden, a guy comes out of the stands, leaps over the little fence, goes to the pitcher's mound and demands that he be given the ball, and he's going to pitch to Hoke. And they let him. He throws 2 pitches that are very wild. Hoke says, that's it. This is a farce. It's over. But the thing that's the real kicker here is that guy who was pitching to him was Fidel Castro. And Hoke later joked and said, you know what? With a little work on his control, Castro would have made a better pitcher than a prime minister. Hoke was pretty clever, too. One time he was running. I think he was off second base. It's first and second. There's a ground ball to the shortstop. Hoke sees that the shortstop will easily be able to turn a double play, so he stops running toward third, bends over, picks up the ball as if he's the fielder, and then just drops it and says, I know I'm out for interference, but I prevented a double play. They had to come up with a rule to change it, all because of his quick thinking. Um, I think when you get to left field, you're looking at another ex-Marine, Bob Skinner, quiet guy, very likable. The team liked him universally. But Vernon Law said that he thought he was underrated because when you put him together, Skinner, with Verdon in center and Clemente in right, he thought they had one of the best outfields of the entire era. So center field was Verdon. Now, if you count his time as a player, a manager, and a coach, he spent more than 60 spring trainings in a Pirate uniform. I didn't know that. I looked it up. It was amazing. He actually led the Pirates along with Maz in RBIs for the World Series, and he stole a lot of hits from the Yankees, at least two key hits that I remember looking up. Some compared him to Willie Mays with defense, maybe not as good, but real close. Ken Griffey Sr., I was talking to him and he praised Verdon. He said he was a very good outfielder. He could cover a lot of ground, good arm, accurate, quite a ball player. In fact, when he was young, first two seasons in the majors, he hit for a pretty good average, but then he had eye problems with his eyesight, and he wound up, as you'll recall, being one of the few major leaguers to wear glasses. There's an irony with Verdon because, he actually could have been and was with the Yankees organization, and then he winds up, helping to defeat them with his bat and with his dazzling defensive plays. Now, right field, of course, belonged to Roberto Clemente. And what an arm he had. You'll remember that, I'm sure. Even in junior high, he showed off his arm because he was actually the ace of his junior high baseball team, the pitching star. Only 12 outfielders have ever won 12 gold gloves, and you're talking the elite, Mays and Clemente. They said that he could hit just about any pitch. He was a kind of a bad ball hitter at times. It was written that he could hit any pitch from the bill of his cap down to his shoelaces. And one time he said, pitch me outside and I'll hit 400. Pitch me inside, you won't be able to find the ball. And Steve Blass said a very similar story. He shared a story with me saying, I went up to Clemente one time and I said, listen, Roberto, if I ever get traded, I'm going to pitch you inside because everybody else pitches you away outside and you hit 350 every year. So Clemente thinks about it, looks at him, he says, Blass, I'm going to tell you one thing. You pitch me inside, I'm going to hit the ball to Harrisburg. I thought, gee, that's a lot of faith in himself. Some people say he complained about his health too much, but he had issues. If you've seen him play, even on just film footage, you probably remember how he'd get into the batter's box, and before he'd dig in, he'd kind of crane his neck and twist it. Sort of reminded me of Linda Blair in The Exorcist, but he was something. And Gene Klein's talking about Clemente and his complaints about health. He said of his former teammate, whenever he came in the clubhouse and said he felt good, he'd have a bad game. But when he complained, my neck hurts, the kids kept me up all night, he'd have a great game. We'll move on to some pitchers now. The ace, of course, was a 20-game winner, Cy Young winner, Vern Law. The funny thing is, going into that season, he was considered to be only the third best pitcher on the team, but he sure did show them. Did a phone interview with him, and he was, I think, 88 years old at the time. When we reached about the 1 hour mark, I said, you want to, take a break, or I can call back tomorrow? No, let's keep talking. Hour and a half, same thing. We hit about 2 hours, and I started to realize that some of the old timers, enjoy, talking about the past, relish reliving their glory, and he was really great to talk to. And his teammates said the same thing. He was a great guy, a devout Mormon. In fact, that's how he got the nickname the Deacon. And out of respect for him, the teammates would never swear around the Deacon. I have about 5 trivia items about him. It was interesting. He and his wife, Vanita, and their 6 children all have the same first initial. All their names start with the letter V. Another time he pitched in he pitched the first 18 innings of a 19-inning ball game. He toils like crazy, works hard, and then the new guy comes in, the reliever, and gives up a run. He loses, he loses the game for the Pirates. Law gets a no decision, but I can imagine the pitch count back then for that game. Another trivia thing, it's been said that Bing Crosby, who owned a small slice of the Pirates, was instrumental in convincing Law's mom to let him sign with the Pirates. And I think it's also kind of interesting that Law nearly won 3 games in that series. He had the lead in Game 7, but the Pirates a couple of times gave up that lead. But you know, not only did Law almost win three, but the first man ever to win three in a World Series was another Pirate. And coincidentally, he had the same nickname, Deacon. This guy was named Deacon, I think it's pronounced Philippi. He won three in the first World Series game ever. And he is a distant relative of an actor, Ryan Philippi, who then had a child, of course, decades later, and he named his kid Deacon. Um, it's kind of amazing that Law was able to win two games in the series because the night the Pirates clinched the pennant, they were on the team bus and players were kind of fooling around, cutting off players' ties, pulling their shirts, ripping them out. And somebody grabbed hold of Law's foot and was twisting to get his shoe off and really hurt his ankle. Later, he favored that ankle and had rotator problems, but he was tough in the series. So was Roy Face. He was called the Baron of the bullpen, and without him, the Pirates finish, who knows, second, third place? It's hard to say. But this guy, although he was extremely short, uh, was a star. They said that only seven pitchers who were 5'9" or shorter since the end of World War II made it to the major leagues long enough to last for any length of time. But he did. And no pitcher has done that if you're under 5'9" since 1976. Scouts don't even look at guys like that. Face went 5'8", and there were times at the end of the season where he was so worn out, he was down to 146 pounds. And ironically, he could have been with the Yankees, just like Verdon was, because the Yankee scouts took a look at him, and guess what they said? Too small. His best pitch was a forkball, which dropped like a spitball, dropped like a split finger fastball. And when Face was once asked, what's the difference between his forkball and the splitter of nowadays, he said about $1 million. He didn't get paid much, as we indicated earlier. Bob Otis was a third string catcher, and he said when Face came in the game, he was determined. It was like you said, wrap it up, boys, it's over. And to this day, he holds a couple of records. One was based in 59 when he won 18-1. I mean, that's hard to believe. So he won 95% of his decisions, and he is still the record holder for the most saves ever in a Pirate uniform. A lot of people think it's Ken Tekulve, but it's still Elroy. The thing that gets me too about pitchers nowadays being kind of pampered. Look at the pitch count I mentioned earlier for Law, but today relievers get into ball games typically in the top of the ninth, clean innings, face three guys, and that's it. Face and other guys back then, when they came into the ball game, there was frequently men on second and third, bases loaded, whatever. He'd come in the middle of an inning in a jam and be expected to work one and a third, two and a thirds, three innings. In 60, for example, he entered ball games 49 times of his 68 appearances. 49 times there were guys in scoring position. And that's why back then those kind of guys were called firemen. Now, the last member of the Pirates I'd like to profile never threw a pitch, never was able to swing a bat, and it was Bob Prince. This guy was a Hall of Fame announcer. And the same thing, I'm going to ask you a few questions and just think it over in your mind. If you can think of the nicknames that he gave to a lot of players. For example, I mentioned earlier, Hoke was the Tiger. Bill Verdon, and I'll give you the answer quickly, but it was the Quail. Skinner was the Dog, or Doggy sometimes they called him. Haddix was the Kitten, and Prince even gave nicknames to his broadcasting buddies, like Jim Woods was the Possum. Okay, now we're ready to take a look at the 60 World Series. A lot of people forget that Maz hit the game-winning home run in Game 1, too. It was early in the game, but the run stood up, and so he officially had the game winner there, and of course in Game 7. Pirates win Game 1. In Game 2, the Yankees bounced back with a 16-3 shellacking of the Pittsburgh Pirates, but the most important thing that may have happened in those first two games, Casey Stengel blew it. Everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but many Pirates and Yankees say he should have started his ace, Whitey Ford, in Game 1 or certainly Game 2. He was well rested. He was on a three-game winning streak. He was in a groove, but Stengel decides to save him for Yankee Stadium in Game 3. Bobby Richardson of the Yankees told me, he said, I think if he would have pitched Game 1, Ford would have done the same thing he did in his next two outings, two shutouts. And that would have changed the entire complexion of the series. And Vernon Law went further. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll say this. The players on the Yankees did not lose the series. It was Casey Stengel. Ford could dominate you. He was the chairman of the board. And Stengel made other questionable moves. In the seventh game, late in the game, Yankees are down by 1 run. A guy gets on first base and he's slow, and for some reason, Stengel does not pinch run for him. He moves to second in scoring position, doesn't pinch run for him, moves over to third base. Even then, he waited a pitch or two and then said, I better get a pinch runner in there. And they said that sometimes in the regular season, old age had caught up with Stengel, and then he sometimes fell asleep in the dugout. Then in the ninth inning, when Maz hits the home run, Maz leads off the ninth. Stengel went to his bullpen and calls on Ralph Terry. He could have gone with Ford, but he had thrown 114 pitches the day before. But how about this? The day before, Ford is winning 8-0 in the sixth inning, and he doesn't pull him. He lets him go the route. Had he just decided 8-0 is a big enough lead, Ford might have been fresh enough for Game 7. Now, the Pirates were a team of destiny all year long, and certainly that held true in the World Series. There were some odd plays, and they almost all went in favor of the Pirates. Eighth inning, final game, Bill Verdon hit what should have been a tailor-made, easy double play, but the ball takes this weird hop, and it hits shortstop Tony Kubek in his throat, and now instead of nobody on base and 2 men out, the Pirates get a break. They go on to score 5 runs with the help of fate once again. And Vernon Law talked about something else that happened a couple of batters later. Clemente hits a ball off the end of the bat, and the pitcher is supposed to go over to first base to cover. Instead, he hesitates, and they had to just eat the ball, basically. Clemente beats it out, and now the lead is cut. So the Pirates are only down by a run, 7-6. Mickey Mantle, years later, looked at that play, and he said, that was it. Casey should have pulled Coates out of the game. The situation demanded it. And it's true. If Coates had covered, the inning's over. Instead, the Pirates score a total of 5 runs that inning, because Smith gets to bat and he hits the 3-run homer. That's his big home run. Plus, another idea of destiny, a concept. Smith should have never hit that home run in a way. The only reason he did is because Burgess hit a meaningless single early in the game, and Murtaugh knows he's slow, so he had to pinch run for him. That brings Smith into the game. Otherwise, Smith doesn't even leave the bench, let alone hit that home run. If you look at the talent, the Yankees were loaded. They had sluggers Roger Maris and Mantle, Hall of Famers in Mantle, Berra, and Ford. And they were tremendous at slugging, but ironically, they lost the last game and therefore the series because of slugging, because of the homers by Smith and Maz. And Maz was far from being a home run hitter, a power hitter. He had just 11 home runs all year, and then he hits 2 in a 7-game series. Another thing that was odd, Maz hits a home run in Game 1. The Pirates don't hit another home run until Game 7. There were like 50 innings between their home runs. And another oddity, Game 7 is the only postseason game ever, World Series, LCS, whatever, with no strikeouts, and that probably will never happen again. And it was the only World Series in which a player from the losing team, Bobby Richardson, wins the MVP. He had 26 RBIs all year long, 150 games, just 26 RBIs. And then in 7 games, he drives in 12. So he had almost half his RBIs in the World Series. Now, why did Richardson get the MVP? He told me it's because Sport Magazine, which awarded the MVP, was voting early. They had to vote, I guess they thought, before the 9th. So that means Maz was cheated. And Elroy Face said, I was too. He thought he was deserving because he was the first pitcher ever to get 3 saves in the World Series. And he could have been, and was in fact, the candidate for the win in Game 7 until, again, the Pirates blew that lead. And of course, the most famous stat of all, Maz's home run is the only, to this day, Game 7 walk-off series-winning home run. Now, on the other side of the coin, the Yankees, in the clubhouse, Mantle was sobbing because he thought this was one World Series we should have won. We're the better team. The 60 Yankees had 6 of the 10 great Yankee players whose uniform numbers were retired, 6 legends. And Yankees had won 7 of the last 11 MVP awards. But as Yogi Berra said to Maris, we just got beat, Roger, by the damnedest baseball team that me, you, or anybody else ever played against. And again, it's a matter of fate. Stengel was fired a couple days later. They said it was because he was too old, and Stengel was bitter and said, I'll never make the mistake of turning 70 years old again. Let's see. I guess that's about it for that. But I would like to add some comments from this book. This is called Wits, Flakes, and Clowns. And there's Stengel on the front cover, but I'd like to focus on the guys that are in this book from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Start with Dick Stewart, a terrible first baseman defensively. He did not like to make plays on defense, so he earned nicknames such as the man with the iron glove. When he was with the Red Sox, they called him the Boston Strangler, and he was also Dr. Strange Glove. The most famous story about him was the time on a blustery day when a hot dog wrapper blows across the infield, and so he just reaches out and grabs it, and the fans sarcastically applaud him like he finally made a play, but on a hot dog wrapper. One time, Elroy Face was entered a ball game, and he had this very effective, crisp, hard throw over to first base for pickoffs. And one time, Stewart went to the mound and said to Face, now don't go throwing the ball over here real hard because I might miss it. And I'm thinking, you're a big leaguer and you're afraid of the ball? And Steve Blass, when I interviewed him, said a similar story, saying that Stewart was lucky that Maz was next to him to give him good help on defense. He said whenever there was a pop-up hit anywhere near Stewart, even if it was in his area and he should have taken it, instead of shouting the usual, I got it, mine, I'll catch this pop-up, he would say, plenty of room, Maz, all yours, and fade away. Hal Smith had a good sense of humor. The guy was once involved in a 17-player trade, but I liked him because he was pretty funny. And maybe that makes sense because he shares the same name as an actor, Hal Smith, who played Otis Campbell, the town drunk on the Andy Griffith Show. A player once asked Smith, he said, now, you don't ever think about the fact that Maz hit the home run after you hit that big 3-run homer, do you? And Smith was kind of understated, kind of smiled and said, I think about it every once in a while. Well, he certainly did. And, you know, when I interviewed him and a name from the past escaped him, he couldn't think of a certain guy's name, he would say, well, that was a long time ago, and I've had a lot of operations, too many foul tips. But he was, again, underrated, underappreciated. The colorful Bob Prince is next, nicknamed the Gunner for his rapid-fire delivery in the broadcast booth. He was famous for wearing those outrageous, gaudy sports jackets, and he was pretty wild at times. One of the craziest things he did was written about by Myron Cope. Prince accepted a $20 kind of dare, a bet from Gene Freeze of the Pirates. He accepted this teasing, come on, you're afraid to do it, tease, sort of like the kid Flick in the Christmas Story, gave into the triple dog dare. But the wager was, I dare you to jump from your 3rd story windowsill of your hotel into this pool in the hotel pool in St. Louis. And they said that he had to clear about 10 feet of cement to make it into the pool. He bragged that he did it easily, but some say he nearly got pulverized. Prince could turn people into wrecks, and one time he almost literally did. He was taking a chartered airplane ride with a pirate publicist named Jack Berger, and Prince had some flying hours to his credit, but didn't have his license yet. But he asked the pilot, can I take the stick and fly a little bit? I said, okay. He did all right. Then he saw a small storm center just off their flight pattern, and he asked permission to fly through the storm. He said, go ahead. And he did without incident, but now the publicist is having fits. And then Prince, so the story goes, briefly flew the plane upside down and then asked permission to land the plane, which was dangerously close to a mountain and I guess a river. And when they came to a halt, he was successful in landing it, but Prince announced, that's the first time I ever landed a plane. And Berger supposedly went back to Pittsburgh, but on a bus. Prince was also famous for coming up with gimmicks like the babushka power. You may have remembered that. They would wave these kerchiefs to incite a rally. And I think that maybe kind of gave way to the Myron Cope terrible towel in a way. Maybe it was inspiration. There was the green weenie. You'd shake these plastic shaped pickle-like devices that basically was a rattle, and you'd supposedly shake it to start a rally. He called Mazeroski's glove the Hoover vacuum. Forbes Field was the house of thrills. And he had all those expressions like, if he needed a rally, if he hoped for rally, he said, we need a bloop and a blast. Home run means you can kiss it goodbye. And if something went well, it was how sweet it is. If let's say a baseball was just barely foul, almost hits the foul pole maybe, it was fouled by a gnat's eyelash, and a close play at first base perhaps was as close as the fuzz on a tick's ear. So he was very colorful. People forget, but he was not always real popular. At first, his style kind of irritated some of the listeners. And one time he excused himself from a dinner table saying, well, I got to get to work. I got to get to the radio booth. 1 million people are waiting to turn me off. Well, that is about it as far as looking at the Pirates. But I'd like to say that if you'd like any of my books, you can go online to Amazon or in the chat room, the chat display. They have my email address, because if you're interested, I would be glad to autograph it and even do a personalized message like Merry Christmas, a gift to Dad from so-and-so, or whatever. So yeah, you can directly email me at wstewart144. So that's W for Wayne and then Stewart144@gmail.com. And I have a blog, kind of a website too, where I post all kind of stuff about sports. So yeah, you might want to add me to the list that says follow, and you'll be notified when there is a new post. So again, that's about it, unless anybody would have a question, anything at all about the Pirates, the season, what have you. Okay. And Gary, I'm sorry, Gary. I see Gary's up there, but I was going to say if there are no questions, then can we switch it back? Because right now I'm unable to hear anything, but I see nothing in the chat. I think, Gary, give me a little wave if you're asking something, because yeah, I can't hear you, but no, okay, we're good.
Okay, if you're sure, I can unmute you there, Mr. Sterling. This is Chris from the library again, but okay.
You're good.
Okay.
All right then. So yeah, it was quite a season. I thank you.
All right, well, thanks everybody for attending, and thank you, Mr. Stewart. It's been a pleasure putting this all together with everybody, and your knowledge is incredible. And I should tell you that Whitney and I were here and listened to it. It was very entertaining, and appreciate all that you've done, and thank you for participating, everybody.
Hey, take care, everybody. Get them
We'll
Bucs.
see you now.
Okay.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Okay. Back. Nice work. That was
Well,
amazing. That was awesome.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was quite a season, I tell you. Let me get this off the screen. Yeah. Yeah, just too bad more people didn't tune in. I don't know, but I see you recorded it though, correct?
Yep.
So maybe, who knows, maybe somebody will, access it or what have you.
Yeah, we can figure out a place to put it. I'm not sure where we could send it. We could put it on the library's Facebook page.
We could, yeah.
And we have an Instagram now too, but I don't know. It's probably better on the Facebook page, I guess. But yeah, we'll go through it. We can edit our 15 minutes beforehand out, and
All right.
yeah.
All right.
Sorry, I stumbled over your introduction. I kind of got a little nervous there. I wasn't sure, but so I didn't come off really that great.
Right.
but you did. That's the important part.
Well, yeah, if you get enough feedback or anything like that, or as I said, if you think there'd be a bigger audience for football, I could talk about the Western Pennsylvania sixth grade quarterbacks and so on. But either way, I enjoyed it. So thanks. Good working with you guys.
Thanks, you too. Don't be a stranger. Let's keep in contact.
Sounds good. Take care,
Okay.
guys. I'll click
Thank
off
you.
now.
We'll see
Bye-bye.
ya.
Yeah.
Bye.